So what we're looking at today, a really, really important subject, whether you're an electrician, kitchen fitter, general builder, we're going to be looking at your schedules today. How can you schedule effectively and deliver on time? And this is really a crucial part of your delivery process. We know we've got the 5 pillars, haven't we? Plan, attract, convert, deliver, and scale. This is your delivery section we're looking at. Now, if I often speak to you privately, or if I spoke to your customers and asked what their biggest frustration is, I usually hear from the majority of you that you've got a problem with your jobs overrunning. That seems to be a common theme that everyone struggles with, and it's a real challenge in the industry. You're not able to plan and organize your teams as effectively as you'd like, and this can become a real frustration, especially if you start to scale and you're bringing on more and more teams, more and more projects. And if you ask your client what your top frustration is with building companies, what's it going to be? They're going to be frustrated that the jobs are overrunning. People took too long, people weren't on site when they said they were, materials were delayed, whatever it is. That would be a client frustration. Now, even top brands, they recognize that delivering on time is absolutely crucial, don't they? We think of brands like Pizza Hut, get your pizza hot and on time, or you get your money back, or whatever it was. They do different vouchers and whatever else now. So it's really important that we go out there and we deliver on time, because that is such a huge part of our USP potentially and our profitability, which we're going to go on to shortly. So this isn't out there to embarrass everyone. The bigger you get as a company, this is a real challenge industry-wide, hands down. Finishing on time is a real problem. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons, isn't there, why we may struggle for time. But the reason time is so frustrating, so important to focus on, is not just because it's a client frustration, and it is, that, believe you me, well, it's probably the most frustrating thing for a client. It is massively bad for you as a company and your profits if you run over time. And I just want to illustrate this for you to show you how serious it is if you run over time. I'm going to share a tool with you in a minute to make this a little bit easier. But just have a look at this worksheet, and I want to see if you can work out how long on average your projects are overrunning. So have a look at this and maybe just write this out on a spare bit of paper. So let's imagine your average project value, let's just put down £100,000 here, and you allocate 10 weeks to do that project. But in reality, let's say it takes you 11 weeks to deliver that. So your actual time minus your allocated time is 1 week. So you've delayed the project by 1 week. If you did that calculation, you can do this in days as well if your projects don't last that long. If you did your delayed time divided by your allocated time, we would have 0.1 times it by 100, and you would have a 10% project overrun on your projects. But it'd be interesting just to throw it over to you. Do you know how long on average your projects overrun? Now, the industry standard is 20%. So on average, the entire construction industry, they've done big studies on it, overruns by 20% on their projects. Does that really matter? But let me just show you this spreadsheet, and I just want to share this with you. So what we want to look at here is, what is this really costing you if your projects are delayed? So this is your delay cost calculator. Now, I want you to put your own figures in this for a minute, but I'm just going to give you my example. So let's imagine, like we said, you are a company that on average does £100,000 projects, and you will estimate that takes you 10 weeks to deliver that project, but actually it takes you 12 weeks. So let's just do industry average. You've got, the only ones you can edit in this, by the way, are the yellow boxes. So let's say you average a 20% delay on your projects. Now, what we can do down here is just roughly work out what our split is between material and labor costs and profit. So most of you are aiming for a 30% gross profit margin. So I'm going to change these figures. Some of you might be a little bit less than that, or some of you might be more. But let's imagine this is on average, it will vary between companies, but let's imagine you do 35% of your job cost in materials, 35% in labor, leaving you a 30% gross profit margin. Now, if you did a £100,000 project, that's going to cost you 35 grand in materials, 35 grand in labor, and you're left with £30,000. So nice and easy maths. That gives us our 30% gross profit margin. That's a single project. Now let's imagine that single £100,000 project is delayed by 20%. So we've still got the £100,000 project. Our material costs will stay the same, but our labor costs will actually go up. And we might think, oh, yeah, everything stays the same, it's just taking us longer. But actually the labor cost goes up, doesn't it? Because most of you will have guys on day rate labor. And if that extends, if the project extends, that's dead money, isn't it? So you've got labor costs that are now getting eaten up into that. So you've got 20% potentially more labor costs. You may have additional delays to factor in. What about your liquidated damages? penalties, your prelims on that project for continuing to run it. So that might be a hard figure to put in there, but let's just put 5 grand of delays on that. So now your £30,000 profit has been eaten up. You've only got £18,000 left. So you've dropped, just by going over 20%, you've dropped your gross profit percentage from 30% to 18%, all right? That's just one project. Now, the people wonder why they might not be making money on projects. This is normally the reason. Let's just expand that out into an annual forecast, really to get this point home. Let's imagine you're forecasting to do £1 million in turnover this year as a company. So if we're going to forecast to do £1 million, then we want our material and labor cost to be 350 grand. So that's the same percentages. We should be left with £300,000 profit. That's what we're forecasting at the beginning of the year. But actually, we run over by 20%. So in fact, we don't get to £1 million. We only actually get to deliver £800,000 worth of work because we've run over by 20%. Our material costs are obviously only a percentage of that, so slightly less. Our labor costs actually go up, and we may have more of these additional delays. Maybe that's a bit much, but let's put in, say, £20,000 of penalties and prelims and whatever else that we lose out on because of running over time. So our profit for the year, instead of being £300,000, actually only £164,000. So if you look at the last figure here, if you're £1 million company and you're running over just by 20%, you're losing £136,000 gross profit every year. Now, out of that, you've got to take off all your overheads and whatever else. But can you see how significant that is? It's massive, isn't it? So now we've looked at how important it is. What we want to do then is think about, well, what's the solution to this? How do we solve it? And when we come up with a solution, we want it to do a few things for us because it's got to be a solution that works. So here's the few things that have got to happen. The first thing is that the system needs to integrate with our current systems that we're using. So all the current things we use, all the software and whatever else, it's got to be able to integrate. Otherwise, we won't use the system if it doesn't integrate. The second thing it's got to be able to do is be nice and simple. It needs to be really easy for you to use as the end user and for others, your team potentially to use. So we want something simple for us. We want to be able to see the big picture. We want to look at a glance at how projects overlap each other. What effect does it have? If an electrical team's busy on this project, we don't want them scheduled on the same week in that project. So we want to be able to plan our timelines with big picture thinking. We also want our timelines to be fluid because things do happen, don't they? Extras are added by clients. Architect delay things. Yeah, we know this. Materials get delayed. Holidays get booked. So we need a system that's going to be able to be amended easily in minutes if we need to. It's got to be fluid. And the last thing we want is we want it to have cross-function purposes. We want it to make other processes easier, not just about the time, but other processes so it can all link in. So if we had a system like that, then we're going to have a really good system that's going to be able to help us going forward. And fortunately, there is a system that does this. And the system I'm recommending to you today is called Instagantt. Instagantt, I believe, is the solution that you're potentially looking for. I've tested loads of these Gantt chart software systems. I've even got my own Gantt chart one that we programmed into Cost Tracker, but this is the best Gantt chart software out there, I believe, for you guys. It's about £7 a month or $7 even, so it's really cheap. We're going to really dive into what some of the features are, how easy it is to use, and why this could really work for you. So as we're going through this, it's not going to be an in-depth analysis of the software. It's not a training module on how to use Instagantt, but as we're going through it, just think big picture for you guys. How could you potentially use this in your company? So the first thing we said, didn't we, is that it needs to integrate with your current systems. Now, the reason I believe Instagantt is so beneficial for you guys is because Instagantt seamlessly integrates with Asana. Now, most of you, well, all of you should be on Asana if you're coaching with me, and I want you to be using this in your own business. There's some massive benefits in Asana if you start using it, and Instagantt is completely seamless with Asana. I'll show you why, and it's great for your team and for you to use. So how does it seamlessly integrate with Asana? So I'm just going to show you how you would set up a project that you may already have set up in Asana. So what we do, we just go over to projects, we just click this plus button here. As I say, I'm not going to go into real detail of like showing you how to do this because you can do it on your own, but I just want to quickly show you. We just connect to an Asana project. It will then search your Asana. So here's mine, Develop Coaching, and it's going to find all the projects I've got. So you'll see all your names down here, but let's, as an example, connect to this project, which is one of my developments, 25 Green Street. So I'm just going to connect to that. So let's just get out of that now. So now it's connected to a project I've already got going on in Asana. If I click on 25 Green Street, here is my project. If I look in Asana, here is the project, 25 Green Street. And now it's just brought it straight over into Instagantt. All right. So this is why it's so useful with connecting with Asana and how it integrates. It's really easy to do it. Now, why do we want it to connect with Asana? Well, Asana is where you are assigning, delegating, and tracking tasks that your team are doing. So this is why I want you to do this, why I want you to connect it, because once a project is planned, you can come in here and you can start assigning out tasks. So let's imagine this one. Let's say I'm cost from Damien, I want assigned. Let's say I want them done by then. I could click in this and I could assign this to Damien. Now, the beauty of this too is that actually, I don't know if you can see that, but you can actually create new virtual users in this. Now, the reason we want to do this, in your Asana, you may only have your main project team assigned in Asana. So you may only have your site managers and foremen and different things and admin staff, which is fine. And you might want to leave it like that. But if you've ever got subcontractors that are not potentially in Asana, then you can create new virtual users. The reason we do that is because then we can see all the tasks that are assigned to virtual users in Asana. And I'll show you why that's useful later. So we can easily assign tasks here and we can tell them how long we expect it to take. And we can also have dependent tasks. And I'll show you that in a minute. But let's imagine we've got a cost down here. Let's imagine that the costing from Laurie is dependent on the costing I get from Damien. They'll all interlink. And we know that we can't get the cost from Laurie until the cost from Damien's been achieved. So there's some dependencies too that really work on this. So that's the integration feature that potentially why you want to use this compared to other Gantt chart software out there, is because it links with Asana nice and easily. You can assign someone something, and once you've assigned them it's going to sit here in Asana and you can see that it's clearly been assigned to someone in Asana too. All right, so that's feature number one. The second feature we want is, we said we need it to be simple. We need something that's really simple. It needs to be really easy for you to use, and it needs to be really easy for others to use too. So I'm just going to show you how you would build out a template project from scratch on this software. So let's just quickly show you that. How would we build out a template project on Instagantt, and is it easy? Well, we'll just come over to projects over here. Let's imagine we're creating brand new project. We'll click on that. Just got to select your workspace and you can select a team. You might not have all of this, but I've got loads of teams obviously with different companies, and we'd create, project name can't be blank. So let's just call this test 1, 2, 3. And now we're creating a brand new project that again is going to be synced straight into Asana. So here's our project. Test 1, 2, 3. Now we can add sections and we can add tasks. So let's just add a section and show you what this means. So let's imagine our section is groundworks, and we can add a task under groundworks, excavate foundations, concrete, DPM, and it just goes on. And then all we're simply going to do, and then we can add another section. So add a section, and then we could say brickwork, and then we can just add tasks to that. Refi. So I'm not going to demonstrate that too much, but there you can see that that's nice and easy to do. Now, all we do from then, once we've built out this Gantt chart, we're simply going to come in and put the dates on it. So we're going to excavate the foundations in this week. We may want to move it and say, actually, let's do it that week. We're going to pour the foundations there. We're going to build up to DPM there. And again, we can make the task dependent. If you drag them across, you can make them dependent on each other. So say, for example, you are delayed, you can move it. All right. So nice and easy, really, really simple to build this out. So for some of you, these will be a lot more complex depending on the type of work you're doing. Some of you, it'd be really, really easy to be able to do this. So that's how you build out the projects. Now, what this then does is it will then go into Asana. If I went back into Asana here, and if I went onto the timeline, that's the one I showed you earlier, 25 Green Street, when the timeline loads, I'll see my timelines on here in Asana too. So you can view it in both. So whatever you do in Instagantt is going to be repeated here in Asana. All right. So nice, really nice and easy to use. Can you see how quick and how simple it is to plan out a project on this? It should take you minutes really to get, depending on the complexity of it, of course. That was one thing we needed to have. We needed it to integrate, and we needed it to be nice and simple. The next thing we need is, as we said, to be able to see the big picture. We want to see how it affects other things. We want to see at a glance how projects overlap. What effect does it have if electrical team A is on this project and we don't want them scheduled on that project B? So we've got to be able to integrate all these teams, especially as you get bigger and bigger. There's a lot of management in trying to process where your teams are, especially if you're doing big jobs. So we can easily do this. Let me show you this feature. So if we go back to Instagantt, I'm just going to show you some example projects I've done here. So let's imagine I've got a template here of a typical project that's running. So you can see the complexity that you can have in some of these. So let's just say a new build. What we want to do is easily be able to see the big picture of this. So how we see the big picture is we need to create not just individual projects, but we need to create groups of projects. So maybe some of your teams work in groups and you may need to group this in different ways, or maybe your teams work across all your projects. But the way you create a group is you go up here and you create a group of projects. See that? And then all your projects that you've currently created individually can sit in one group. And the reason we want that is because we want to see the big picture. So here's a group, as Blue Peter says, here's one I made earlier. Let's imagine I've got a group called new builds. Now, I've got 2 new build projects here and they're overlapping each other. So if I go into workload, I can easily see where everyone's assigned. So say, for example, my bricklayers, I'm looking at this and thinking, well, how are they going to do the brickwork on project 1 and then do the brickwork to DPC on project 2? It's not going to happen, yeah, because I've got them overlapped. So I may easily want to move them, yeah? So you can see from this how you can start assigning users and finding out exactly what everyone's up to. So the way we do this is by that feature I said earlier, create a virtual user. So you may do this as teams, you may have team 1, team 2, or you may have it as subcontractor teams. It's maybe individual names of people, but however it's going to be for your business, you can start seeing the big picture. What are they working on? When are they overlapping so that they can't handle too much? How do I need to move things across? So this is brilliant for your big picture planning on what's going on. The other thing you can do too, this is for individual user management. The other thing you can do is look at an overview of your projects to see when they're starting and when they're finishing. So on this particular one, we've only got 2 projects, so it's nice and simple, but we can see we've got an overlap here. Now, I could go and get more detail on that and go back to the workload to make sure, or I could do an extended view, and I might look at that and think, I don't mind the overlap, that's fine. By the time we finish that foundation, we can start that one. Or you may look at it as the compact view and see, right, I cannot start. If I do kitchens here, I cannot start the next kitchen until that day. So you've got a nice feature here where you can see the big picture, and that's really, really vital. So we've got a few things we looked at. We've got it integrated, we've got it simple, we're seeing the big picture. The next thing we said is that we want it to be fluid, because things change, don't they? Extras are added, architects delay things, holidays are booked, things are fluid. We need to amend things, and sometimes you need to amend things every single day, which is frustrating. We want to do that really quickly. So let me again just show you the workload feature. Let's show you something being moved, for example. So let's imagine the truss roof on project 1 is going to be delayed, and we now know that we can't get the truss roof until October. Let's move this over. Do you notice as I move this, notice what else is moving on the bottom? The felt and battening and slating on project 1, because it's a dependent task. So rather than having to go in and edit everything, this does it all for you. Yeah, if you set them up right and you create dependencies, because obviously you can't start felting and battening and slating until the roof's been pitched, you can see that the big impact it has on everyone else on your workload. So this is why we need it to be fluid as we're doing things, which is a really, really good feature there if we can use that too. So that's the fluidity of it. The other thing to think about also, if we make changes, sometimes what's frustrating is you can make a change and you might think, well, what impact is that having on everything else? It's got a really good feature here called baselines. So if we go back to the individual project, let's imagine this project here, we set a baseline, and this is like a particular point that you want to be able to measure. So let's create a new control point. Let's call this baseline. This was the original forecast. We'll just call this original, and we'll create that. So now we've got a nice original baseline done. Let's imagine actually we don't even start this project till that week, and if we go to baselines and we load the original baseline, what we can now see is where we're falling behind. And we may think, right, how do I bring that back? Well, actually, let me bring that back to there, and we'll see if we can shorten that up a little bit, and let's apply more resource to get that. That's it, brilliant. We're back to where we were originally scheduled. So baseline's a brilliant feature just to track where you're potentially losing it and how you can bring it back after. So that's the fluidity of Instagantt too, which you're going to need. So quite a few features there that we've got. So we've seen it's integrated, it's simple, it shows you big picture, it's nice and fluid. The last thing I want to be able to show you on this is how we want it to have cross-function purposes. So not only does it want to be able to plan out your timelines, but it wants to be able to function across other areas of your business to make those areas easier too. So what particular areas could a Gantt chart help you in this regard? Well, let's have another look at the Gantt chart. These are some areas I want you to be thinking about using it with. So let's imagine we've got our individual projects here. What we could do is tie our foundation, excavate our foundations. There might be an invoice point that we want to target with this. So what we could do is we could create a payment schedule, and we could say valuation 1 is linked to the foundations being excavated. So when you're reviewing this each week, if this bit gets completed, which I can show you how you do that, you just come onto here, you can mark it as completed. That will then trigger your bookkeeper to type up valuation number 1. You could do it with other things. You could have special order items that could come in. So you might say, when I reach this point, I need to order my lintels. So let's put a special order item in there. Or when I get to this point, I need to order the windows and doors. When I hit that point, I want my site foreman to organize a building inspection, and you could assign that as a task, and you don't even have to think about it. It only starts triggering once you've marked the task or a dependent task as complete. So that's some of the cross functions you can have with Instagantt, where it starts working across all your different departments to really help you sort of try and keep everything in order across the board. So there's some of the features that you want to use with that, all the Instagantt features. So here's the template of all the features it's got. Tons and tons of things down here that you could use it for.